the name of the podcast is the Big Questions Podcast.
Yep.
And so I like to start each of these episodes the same way by asking the same question. Depending on your situation, I find the answer can be very brief or very long. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just going to let you speak from the heart. So here it is, the first and probably the biggest question. Who are you?
Well, yeah, can be a very broad question. My name is Kai, and I'm 50 years old, and was privileged enough to kind of be raised overseas. So I'm bilingual. I speak Spanish. I have a master's in a Bachelor of Science in economics. I used to be sort of a 9-to-5 guy, and through the use of psychedelics, I kind of realized I didn't want to spend my life as a a bond broker or a mortgage broker, or where I was destined to head with my degree in economics, and sort of started taking a different path after a while. Yeah.
Pretty awesome. So you were basically just working a 9-to-5 typical sort of office job, and then you had some experiences that broke you out of that mold or that pattern. Hey.
Yeah, well, I was going to University of Victoria on Vancouver Island, Canada, and yeah, I was well on my way. My intention was to get into economic services, and it was actually LSD that dissuaded me from that. I kind of halfway through my fourth year and final year of getting my degree, a friend and I went to the Carmana Valley and took LSD. Carmana Valley is an old growth rainforest, for those who may not be familiar with it. And I just started perceiving reality very, very differently. I recognized there was a whole different level of reality that I had yet to be exposed to, i.e. plant spirit, energy, ethereal beings, all kinds of things that I didn't even think existed, or it's not that I hadn't even thought of, let alone didn't think existed. I was unaware as to different perceptions of reality that were out there. Mm-hmm.
And so was that your first psychedelic experience of your entire life, or not?
It was the first time I kind of dabbled. It was not the first psychedelic experience I'd ever had, but it was the first kind of what I would say connecting experience I had through psychedelics. I had done it as a party drug, I guess, for lack of a better situation, but that term set and setting is very relevant. I was in the right set and setting, i.e. a rainforest on the west coast of Canada in the fall with no people around, and it ended up being one of the more spiritual experiences of my life, and kind of made me realize that there was more to the world than meets the eye. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty crazy talking to people like yourself over the years, and how often psychedelics plays a pivotal role in somebody's kind of spiritual awakening. And by spiritual awakening, I just mean the fact that you awoke to the spiritual dimension of life, or whatever you want to call it. So have you met a lot of people who have had similar experiences, but maybe without psychedelics? Or in your circle, is it usually tied to some kind of psychedelic experience?
Well, in my circle, there's a lot of mixed reviews around psychedelics, because a lot of people use psychedelics as escapism or sort of spiritual bypass. I am spiritual because I have done psychedelics, as opposed to actually becoming truly comfortable in their own skin and integrating a lifestyle that is helpful to them and the world around them. So yeah, it's interesting you should ask this question, because it's kind of the subject amongst my peers right now. Is like, there's a lot of, like anything, you can use psychedelics as a tool, or you can use it as a crutch. So back to the specifics of the question, I'd say all of the above. I have met because of the nature of my own interests, I have surrounded myself with people who have definitely had psychedelic experiences. And I would say the vast majority of them have found them helpful. But we've also come across a surprisingly large number of people who, I've done ayahuasca 25 times and therefore I'm enlightened, and yet their life is a complete disaster because they haven't integrated. They've used it as an excuse to be egocentric, as opposed to a way to find higher levels of meaning. So there's a mix there, just to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean the ego, and this is true whether there's psychedelics involved or not, but it seems like the ego is really good at hijacking whatever it is that you're doing and making it a thing of its own, right? So, I mean, I've met people like that who their spirituality becomes kind of a source of fuel for the ego. Sounds like similar things in the psychedelic community, where people are basically doing it almost like bragging rights. It sounds like from what you're describing, it's almost like I've done it 20 times. It's like, okay, but what have you gotten out of it?
Exactly. What have you integrated? How is your life better for it? How more compassionate are you? How well do you treat the people around you? Those are the kind of the litmus tests that really matter. Yeah.
Totally. So you started with LSD on the West Coast. That was your first
Mhm.
connecting experience. And so did you drop out of university at that point, or did you go through with it, and kind of what came next? How did this unfold for you?
Well, I was so close to done. I did end up finishing my degree. I do have a Bachelor of Science in Economics. And I'm glad I finished it because, especially as this topic becomes, or this conversation becomes more topical, I'm finding that degree incredibly relevant and helpful in today's world, as our sort of economic world seems to be disintegrating around us, or at least shifting dramatically. Yeah, but for me, I graduated. I ended up just working seasonally, taking time off, investing in that property we had discussed on a personal level earlier, which also was, in hindsight, a great decision. It shaped my life. I ended up becoming more interested in nature and experience and travel as opposed to money and career. Yeah, so those would be the fundamental changes. I also had my own delusions, my own pitfalls, my own ups and downs. So sort of it's a caution I have when I talk about psychedelics is it's not a panacea, it's not a cure-all. There's no shortcuts to actually becoming self-aware and comfortable in your own skin, dealing with your own subconscious trauma and or unhealthy kind of reactions to experience. So, in all of that, I definitely went sideways and backwards at times as well, just to be clear,
Yeah.
as one does in life.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you're having these experiences that are quite novel, and it's like unless you have people around you that have been there or that have some frame of reference, you're going in blind basically. So, I can imagine that's not easy to figure out what's going on. But is it fair to say that psychedelics is a tool, just like meditation, just like yoga, just like a variety of different practices? Like it's just a means to an end, basically, right? I mean, when
Yeah,
used correctly.
exactly. Well, yeah, the means I like the first analogy of being a tool. Like you can use it as a tool to create and build something. You can also use it as a tool to destroy things.
Mm.
It's just like a cult leader. Like a lot of people, become spiritual, develop followings, and they have good intentions. They become corrupted by ego. Just that can happen with psychedelics as well. I've met people who become very corrupted by the perceived power they get from psychedelic experience. So yeah, I have that caution because I've been in and out of holding space and doing different things around this field for quite a while, and I've definitely seen people lose themselves and actually do damage to themselves and others because they have deluded themselves around the perceived awareness and or power they think they're getting from psychedelics. There's no shortcut. It's just a tool, and ideally, it's a tool that is used constructively.
Mm. And so I mean, maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit, but who kind of instructed you or taught you how to use them as a tool for what you're using it or what you have used it for?
Well,
Or did you kind of have to figure that out on your own?
It was both. I definitely, just as a personality type, I like to learn things the hard way, like most of us, specifically most men. But I also, the very first, I would say, guided psychedelic experience I had was on ayahuasca. And I was very, very lucky to have sat with a married couple, Peruvian married couple in the Sacred Valley in Peru near Cusco, and they were just so authentic and so emphatic that this experience will do nothing for you unless you integrate what you're exposed to. And that message was just resounding, 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 like integrate, integrate, integrate. Like otherwise it's just a light show. It's just going and watching fireworks, and then you're right back in your life. If you don't change your life, if you don't integrate, shape shift your life in some way, then you will have accomplished nothing. And I was lucky enough to sit with them several times and learn a lot through their modality. And then I also started volunteering for other people who had more experience than me. And I also just sat with it myself, and then very gently started hosting for other people. And in that, you learn a lot as well. Like sometimes it goes really well, sometimes it doesn't. Why didn't that go well? How can I do better? You learn by doing. You make mistakes, you learn, and yeah, that was so. It's a bit of both. Mhm.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so let's talk about integration then, because I think whether it's psychedelics, some kind of traumatic experience, or even maybe just like a breakthrough realization that you have about your life,
Mm.
integration seems to be key, right? I mean, that's how you
Yeah.
take whatever it is that you've just experienced and use it to kind of reshape yourself, right? Or realign yourself. So, what in your experience are some of the, what do you, well, forget best, what are some of your favorite integration methods in terms of that process?
Yeah, well, the couple I sat with, and I'll name them, Eric and Nilda. I know they're quite like ayahuasca is legal in Peru, so they have nothing to hide. He was all about sitting with self, i.e., meditation, and he would advocate sitting with self meditation as the best, most fundamental way of gaining inner peace. And when I first heard it, I thought, oh yeah, well, that's one of the ways, sure, yada yada. But the further I've gone in life, like it is the way. Like if you can't sit comfortably with yourself, if you can't enjoy your own company, you have not really accomplished much, especially in this world of constant distraction, devices, Facebook, media. The more aware I become of just how addicted we are to technology. Like I have so many friends, they have an uncomfortable thought. You literally see uncomfortable thought. Oh, device. Oh, uncomfortable thought. Device. We yeah. So that ability to just, oh, I'm having an uncomfortable thought, and actually just sitting with it, or I'm having an uncomfortable feeling, just actually sitting with that uncomfortable feeling and trying to process it and dissect it, as opposed to avoiding, constant avoidance, self-avoidance, seems to be the crisis of our time. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for some people, maybe it's an uncomfortable thought. For me, I know my weakness is boredom. Like if there's an idle moment, like
Oh
five
yeah.
minutes of nothing happening, I'm like, oh, I might as well check the news or whatever. And it's like, no, no, stay away. But yeah, so sitting with your uncomfortable thoughts, sitting with your sort of unpleasant feelings instead of distracting yourself. That's one way that you're suggesting. And that sounds like more of a general practice, right? I mean, you can do that at all times. Are there
Mm.
specific integration methods that you think are more worthwhile for psychedelic experiences, or is it just the same as this couple told you about sitting with it and just meditating, basically?
Well, that is to me the primary integration method. One of the secondary integration methods is exposing yourself to nature.
Mm.
And that's also a first world empirical study method. Our hormonal system calms down, our stress levels calm down when we get outside, breathe fresh air, and actually, smell nature, see nature, feel nature. Yeah. So for me, if I'm having uncomfortable thoughts or feelings and I'm sitting with myself and that's just not really doing it for me, I will go for a walk. I will get outside. I will go and sit under a tree. I will, go for a light jog. I will enjoy the sunshine or the rain, whatever it may be. Yeah. So, and as well, sometimes I do need emotional support. So I do have a handful of good friends, trusted friends who I can phone and actually be real with and actually talk about my feelings with. And it's vice versa. Like I just had a friend who phoned me the other day. He had been very emotionally supportive of me during certain events of my life, and I always assumed I would be able to offer something for him down the road. And it was a very sad experience. He has two kids. His son's best friend had tried to commit suicide because his son's best friend is gay, and his father's a very hardcore religious individual who believes that's sinful. And so this kid was repressing himself, and my friend was devastated. Like he was just devastated that this had happened to sort of someone he knew and cared about. And so I was the first person he called, and we talked for like a good half hour. And so just having that emotional support during times of crisis, people who you are real with during normal times, and who you can continue to be real with during times of crisis. And, I've been through divorce. I've been through my own stuff as well, and I've been very lucky in a way to have three or four key people that like I just can speak truth to, and who will unconditionally support me, and just not necessarily try to fix anything, but just hold space for me with kindness and love. And that very often is enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is it's a learned skill to just listen to someone and not offer solutions. At least, again, maybe for me or maybe for some of us, I feel like when someone comes to me with a problem, my default programming is to start to troubleshoot, right? No matter what, who it is, my kids, my wife, whoever. If you're coming to talk to me about a problem and you're not looking for a solution, I used to just view that as like, why are you whining to me? It's, but now I've learned that sometimes just listening to someone and offering nothing except just being there for them is all they need. And yeah, that's an important lesson for people to learn, I think, especially if you're like me.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the male default too. Let's fix this. And that was the feedback I got from my friend, is I didn't offer him solutions, and I just let him speak. And he was like, oh, this might sound like first world problems. I'm like, no, that doesn't sound like first world problems. That sounds really, really deeply, profoundly shitty. And I'm really sorry you've had that experience. Like, it's valid. Your frustration, your grief, your anger is valid. And then that was the feedback he gave me. He's like, I just needed to be heard. Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. Try to fix it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, man. And so do you think people like, the situation that you're describing where somebody has been repressing a key aspect of themselves for years due to shame and guilt and all this stuff, do you think that psychedelic or plant medicine would be helpful for people like that? Like, do you think that there's certain people that are, better positioned to be helped by it? Or do you think that it's just kind of like set and setting and how you're going into it doesn't really matter individually what your issues are?
Yeah, well, set and setting is far more important than the psychedelic itself. Is like, just as an example, I'll use my friend as an example again. He came to a safe space, a friendship that he felt completely safe in, and that set and setting was enough for him to just speak his truth, articulate his sadness, and move through it. So without set and setting, you really don't have much. Can you repeat the question again, please? Just,
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, specifically with psychedelics, are there certain types of personal problems that you've seen people kind of recover from, like, very quickly? Like, is there, I guess I'm looking for, like, what's a good scenario for when someone might want to say, I should explore maybe plant medicine as an option.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I'll go with example. I sat with a couple last week, and an elderly woman, she's in her 60s. She, her whole life, had confidence issues, self-defacement issues, self-esteem issues. And halfway through the session, she was doing all kinds of weird body movements, like just feeling into all of this mucky, shitty shame. And she just at one point went, oh my God, all of this is my mother's. None of this is mine. I've just learned this as habit. And it was an epiphany for her. And she quite literally realized that she had just learned, like, so back to Western world psychology, family of origin, how were you raised? What's your relationship with your parents? So the psychedelic experience didn't, it just allowed her to expedite sort of a self-awareness process that was, wow, I was raised by a completely insecure woman who taught me everything I know. And I've never really seen that in context. This is just a habit. This isn't me. I can choose a different path. And that insight was enough. She has moved forward from that, realized that she doesn't need to hold any shame or guilt around it. She needs to start acknowledging every time she feels insecure or any of these other uncomfortable feelings, and just be aware that she can decide to feel and do and be a different way. And there's no shortcut to that. And yet, through her psychedelic experience, she could see it clearly, but she still had to make the decision to move past it, and she did. And then to parallel that, like, her partner is someone I've sat with 5 times, and he's what I call a repeater. He keeps having the same insight over and over and over again, but he keeps resisting shifting it. He's not ready to shift it yet. So just the experience itself is not enough. You have to have the courage and the determination to actually do something about it. So,
yeah, you have to act on it. And
exactly.
Do you ever encounter people who, after one of these types of experiences, like the next day, maybe they go, oh, it was really fun and nice, but it was just because I was on drugs. And they kind of invalidate some of the findings and insights that they had from the experience the night before, maybe?
I'm trying to think of a single example of that, and I cannot think of a single
Really?
example of that.
Wow,
But
interesting.
that's also the vetting process, right?
Mhm.
So if someone approaches me, I don't be like, oh, sure, here you go. Like, let's just do this. I'm like, well, no, why? Why are
Yes.
you doing this? What are you trying to accomplish? So if people come in with an intention and they really do have a sincerity in trying to do it, it's hard to walk away from the experience going, oh, well, that was just an altered experience. Because if you come in that emotionally authentic and open, yeah, it just the experience speaks for itself. It's hard to deny that there's actually something really happening there.
Yeah.
I have heard of people say that, but typically when they say that, they're judging another person's experience. Oh, well, you were just altered, therefore it's not legitimate.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the fact that how you approach it, the fact that it's not just for fun or a
Hmm.
party setting, I think you probably avoid a lot of those types of situations. But I think for people who do it recreationally, I've heard people who have a great time. They have all these great sort of interactions with people, and they feel like they've formed these like deep connections with people. And then the next day, they're like, "Oh yeah, it was just because I was high or whatever." It's like, no, that
Yeah.
was real. Like,
Mhm.
but yeah, so I think it depends. Like you said, you're bringing people in who are looking to get something out of this. It's not just a fun time on a Saturday night kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So are you comfortable talking about kind of your actual work in this and how it's evolved from what you started off doing? You already kind of talked about it. You were helping with ayahuasca ceremonies. You were leading people through them.
Mhm.
And now you're onto something different. So what was the change and what caused it and what's your new modality and how are you finding
Well,
it?
yeah, the issue I started having with ayahuasca specifically was that this culture was developing around it that I felt was kind of, I don't know what's the right word for it, escapist. That like there's all of these woke people doing ayahuasca, 1 to 10 times a year, surrounding themselves with this language and almost like an exclusivity in it. It's like, oh, we have this experience, we're exclusive, we're more woke than other people. And then and because I was in the community for a while, I'd start watching them and just see these levels of arrogance, delusion, denial. And also in the volunteering I was doing, some of the people I was assisting, I thought were behaving very irresponsibly, and unethically. And I've had some of my own challenges around it as well. Like you're working through a medicine, and you're doing is trying to hold safe space so people can conduct their own healing, and then you start thinking, well, this is me, I'm special, I have healing powers. So I saw this in others and I started seeing this in myself as well. And then I also saw, like, in that, like, the money factor. Some of the people I was helping, they were conducting ceremonies that had way too many people were falling through the cracks. And then one of the sort of sidebars I came is like, I actually started dealing with people who went into suicidal ideation, massive depression, all kinds of really serious issues as a result of being in ceremony. So there was a danger to it as well. There was a negative side to it. And in the end, kind of crashed and burned myself. Like, I just got exhausted. I started making bad decisions. My own ego was getting involved as well, and I was becoming like a power playing with people who I thought were unethical, and I, strangely enough, was feeding into that myself with my own kind of crap, to be brutally honest. And so I stepped right back for a while. I went, well, this isn't doing as I can't be involved in this. It's actually hurting people. Like, so, and I'll give one ceremony as an example. There were literally 40 people sitting. The guy conducting it was in chronic pain because he is not dealing with his own stuff. He has fibromyalgia, a bunch of other issues. He was conducting ceremony as a means to his own healing and distraction, as opposed to actually authentically helping people. He had 4 or 5 people in the room helping. All of them were like completely inexperienced. 2 of them were very psychologically damaged themselves, and were running around kind of almost spreading their shit around the room. And I walked out of that weekend just like, I can't do this. I can't be involved in this. This is actually a garbage modality. This is dangerous. This is damaging people. And in that, of those 40 people, I'd say half of them were like, oh, that was a great light show. Yay. And I'd say about 10 of them were like, that was a horrible experience. I don't understand what just happened. I was overdosed. I was not supported. I have been completely traumatized by the experience. So I backed right out. And had started using MDMA myself therapeutically, and just part of my recovery and part of helping other people recover was using that, recommending that. And then one of my friends said, well, can I do it with you, because I feel safe with you? So I sat with him and kind of helped him deal with some of his existential crises that had arisen through an ayahuasca ceremony. And one of the things I enjoyed about MDMA therapy, and I also do combine it with psilocybin, and I'll get into that in a bit, is that it is so gentle, and safe. Especially, and again, like, you need a good set and setting. You need to do it with people you trust. But there's just, ayahuasca's of a different culture. It's born in the jungle. It's born in a place where there's massive duality. There's tremendous light and dark. Like, things are eating each other, killing each other, growing, dying constantly. There's just this tension there. And so that, yeah, it doesn't seem to suit our cultural need at this moment. It seems to just be too much for some people. They just get thrown out of whack, especially when we have, and myself included, white people basically taking this culture from the jungle and going, oh, I can do this here, and sharing it with other white people, to overly generalize. I think we've stepped out of our I don't know what the word, we've kind of overstepped ourselves a bit in this regard. I think that we have, like, for example, historically, the shaman was trained kind of from infancy. Whereas here, like, we think, oh, I go to Peru and I, take a training course for a month and I'm qualified. And I'll speak to this from my own experience. Like, the amount of stuff that can come through the ayahuasca experience. And one of the reasons I left as a practitioner was I was in way over my head. Like, I was dealing with men who were sexual predators, and I didn't know they were sexual predators, and I didn't understand that energy of sexual predation. And I was exposing myself to things that were way beyond my skill set. I had no idea what was going on. I was dealing with women who had been sexually traumatized, which is very common. And the nature of ayahuasca, like, if I was a fully trained shaman, that energy would have been moved and dealt with in a safe way. And I just had no idea, like, what I could sense what was happening. I had like an intellectual understanding of what was happening, but I had no tools to actually manage that in an effective and safe way for people. And so that was part of why in that ceremony I referred to, and excuse me if I'm rambling, but that ceremony of 40 people, there was all kinds of trauma. There was a psychopath in the room. There were women who had been sexually assaulted in the room, and it was just a shit show of energy. And there was cross transference, like, my energy, like, someone who was traumatized energy was going into someone else. The psychopath was doing his psychopathic thing, and nobody was regulating any of it. It was just a big smorgasbord shit show. And that's when I just realized we are in way over our heads. We are in way over our heads.
I got to ask you a sidebar question before we move on from this, but keep going. I just want to, I want to make sure we don't get too far ahead. I got to ask you about the psychopath.
Yeah, well, I was just kind of wanting to get down there, like, just to give the point, like,
yes.
We as a Western culture don't understand the true nature of, dare I say, reality, and especially this medicine's role in reality. Like, it can blow things pretty wide open to a degree that we don't necessarily understand, or do we have the tools to manage. So back to the original question, like, I just something that's more culturally appropriate, gentle, and safer is the main reason I shifted.
So real quick, because I've wondered about this, with sociopaths and psychopaths, my understanding of that, really broadly speaking, and I don't have a degree in anything, so take it for what it's worth, but sociopathy is almost a lack of empathy, right? It's like a person
Mhm.
who literally cannot put themselves in another person's shoes. They don't really have that ability to empathize with others, right? Um, so what is the effect of psychedelics on a person like that? Because to me, it's like I used to think that that would be almost like a cure or a potential treatment for sociopathy.
It can go both ways. It can break their heart wide open and they can realize they're a piece of shit. And I've seen that happen, or it can
Okay.
just like, or it doesn't touch them at
Wow.
all.
Wow.
Because I
Interesting.
think some of some of the crisis we have of narcissism, i.e., Donald Trump and all his followers, not all, but his
Mhm.
root followers, um, some of that is learned, some of that is cultural, and some of that is biological or brain chemistry. And I've
Mhm.
seen both. When it's brain chemistry, there's not much you can do about it. That person needs to really be um, looked at with caution
Right.
and protection, like protect others from them.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying that like if the sociopathy or the narcissism is more learned and culturally
Mm,
or through family or whatever, then maybe a psychedelic experience. I mean, because psychedelics decondition, right? I mean, I feel like they
mm.
strip away the cultural conditioning and the ideas that you have about the way things are, and cause you to look at things in ways that you've never been able to look at them before. So for someone who's culturally conditioned or just conditioned to be kind of narcissistic and stuff, I can imagine the psychedelics might have that effect that you described, like, holy crap, I'm a piece of shit. Whoops.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But
I
when it's
thought
a
I was
chemical,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
okay. Interesting. Okay, well, so having read a little bit of Terence McKenna and Food of the Gods, he talks about this kind of symbiotic relationship that we have with plants, and he talks about plant intelligence and the Gaian mind. And what you said about ayahuasca being kind of out of our cultural paradigm really resonated with me, because to me that makes sense. As a culture, our ancestors and so on had, for you and I, our ancestors had very little interaction or no interaction with this particular plant medicine. So it's foreign to us culturally. It's foreign to us in terms of our biology or any kind of symbiosis we've had with different plants. Like that's not one of the plants that our ancestors would have interacted with. So you're saying that like because of that or as a result of that, ayahuasca might not be the best for the Western mind or the Western experience.
I think we've abused it.
Yeah.
I think we've abused it, and I think it's actually messed with us a bit as well because we don't know how to handle it. Absolutely.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so then let's talk about something that we most likely had a longer, more friendly relationship with in terms of plant medicine,
Mm-hmm.
psilocybin. And you
Yeah.
mentioned MDMA and psilocybin as a potential treatment or a modality. So let's hear about that. What are your experiences with that combo?
Well, I'm going to start with just the science behind psilocybin and especially microdosing and its neurological benefits. It promotes something called neurogenesis. It literally helps your brain grow new brain cells. How can that be anything but fantastic? I also, coincidentally, my ex-wife has quite bad eyesight, so we started testing her eyes because we were trying certain modalities to try to see if we could mitigate the. There's a point to this story, trust me. If we could mitigate the degeneration of her eyes, and so I was doing the eye chart as well, and like I had a 8.5, 8, and I used to be 10, 10. I started microdosing 10, 10. I'm 50. My eyesight got better over the course of 3 months.
So it actually helped with your visual acuity and it reversed the deterioration of your eyesight.
Literally. Sounds fantastical, but I know this to be true. All of the research is very clear. Neurogenesis, you grow new brain cells, neurological health. It's good as an antidepressant. Um, and so you can have your own experience with psilocybin, i.e. the micro dosing, the mini dosing, the macro dosing. You can also use MDMA just as its own experience. The two together seem to just enhance the best of both properties and just give people a really safe space to process their stuff, for lack of a fancier word, and the double benefit of including psilocybin in that, is MDMA has a slightly neurotoxic effect on the brain, and psilocybin has beneficial effects on the brain. So they seem to kind of neutralize. So just from a brain health perspective, also in the experience, you have insights, you recognize old energy patterns are maybe toxic or unhelpful. The psilocybin, literally your neurological connections are shifting. You're actually literally changing the neurological wiring of your brain in the experience. So part of that reset idea is that with the psilocybin doing that to your brain, you can like literally change the electrical wiring of your brain. You have an insight, you decide you want to shift out of negative energy patterns. Your whole brain's kind of had like a nice massage. As you come out of that and resettle, you can literally rewire your brain, into new thought patterns, new energy reactions. All kinds of exciting stuff can happen in that experience.
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like it almost like intensifies neuroplasticity, right? I mean, your brain is already plastic in the sense that it can make new connections, and this, like you said, it massages it so that all those, it's just softer, more malleable, easier to shape new patterns, essentially.
Absolutely, and especially like I'm 50, so the aging process, we become less plastic. It kind of allows for that movement, and I'll refer to that woman I use as an example in her mid 60s. She had a pretty plastic experience. Her brain shifted tons, and she recognized old energy patterns. And I've done follow-up work, of course, and she's just kind of gone with this new kind of, hey, I don't need to hold on to any of that crap. I can just plastic my way right out of that.
Yeah, and from my own experience witnessing people who have done this, like I've noticed that, like you said, the changes are not temporary. And even though maybe some of the old energies and patterns come back or try to encroach, that whatever realization or insight the person had that day is still there, and it's still very real and bright and strong. And when that old conditioning or those old energy patterns come back, the people that I've seen do this, they seem to be able to resist and return to that new insight, that new pattern that they've formed from this experience. So, you know, not only is it doing the work when you're going through the experience, the effects seem to be long lasting.
Yeah, and then that to me is only accomplished through self-awareness. So sorry, I'm just going to shift a bit here.
Yeah, no sweat.
Again, I like using examples rather than pretending I know much. The example being that couple, the fellow, and we did follow-up work as well, and I could see that his resistance to change right the very first time we sat, and that he was still like he was raised religious, and some religions tell us that we are bad people, we live in sin, etc., etc. He believed all of that, and that he somehow had to find God as his answer and his salvation, which put a lot of pressure on him. And so part of his journey has been deconstructing the fact that he doesn't need to have an epiphany and find God. He just actually needs to find a healthy way to live his life, where he actually finds moments of happiness and acts of service and small moments of joy. Like that is, to me, the God space. It's not, something you find outside of yourself. It's something you embody in how you live your life. And he was very resistant to that as a fundamental truth, because he had been so culturally indoctrinated by his upbringing. So yeah, that self-awareness didn't just come through an experience. It came through a lot of hard truth, like, wow, I am truly, really deeply culturally indoctrinated. And I will have to put a lot of time, effort, and energy to break out of this very deep embedded pattern of mine. And it's taken him years. Unlike his partner, who and like there's always layers to the onion, but like the amount of movement she made in one session was extraordinary. Like one of the best returns on investment, so to speak, that I've ever seen. She had been in therapy for years, and she said, this 3-hour experience did more for me than 3 years of therapy.
My God, that's an endorsement right there. Holy smokes. Yeah. And it's crazy that she was able to, it's so tricky, right? It's like putting something down. It's like, how do you explain to someone how to put a heavy box down that you've been carrying around with you since you were 7? You know what I mean? You're walking around with this big thing of beliefs about yourself and stress and negative thoughts. And it's literally just put that shit down. There's no trick. There's no, you can meditate, you can do psychedelics, but at the end of the day, you just got to take that shit and put it down.
And that's where the self-awareness becomes such a critical element, because if you don't even know you're carrying it, you're so used to carrying it, you don't even know you're carrying it. As soon as you realize you're carrying it and that you're tired of carrying it, you can put it down.
Right.
And so that's exactly what she did.
Yeah, but where her partner, on the other hand, from what you're saying, it's almost like he's constructed this big story around what he has to do to put it down. It's like,
I have to carry this load.
And I have to figure out how to deconstruct it. It's like, no, just it's not true. The stuff that you believe about being a born sinner and all that stuff, just put it down. Just put it down.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the issue too, is that like he was trained in that from precognition, like he was raised in it. And so I'm not belittling the challenge he has, because it is hard to deconstruct stuff that you've picked up pre-memory, precognition. And to his credit, he is making progress, and it is not always easy. And at the same time, sometimes that dime just drops and people just shift almost effortlessly.
Yeah, incredible, isn't it? I like that term precognition, because it's very accurate. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we deal with, the deep-rooted stuff, is precognition, right? We're not aware of it. It's like subconscious. Yeah. I call them assumptions, right? We all of our conscious beliefs are resting on a foundation of assumptions that we never talk about, we never acknowledge, and it's these assumptions that actually shape all of our other opinions, right? And it's like the key seems to be to get to the root of all of those beliefs and see what is this foundation? Is it valid? Is it accurate? Because when I started to look into myself and look for those kind of core beliefs that I never acknowledged, I found that they were all wrong. Like I had this core belief that things were permanent, and that what I was doing now and how my life is now is going to be the same for 10, 15, 20 years. Whereas the truth of the matter is impermanence. Nothing stays the same, and change is the only constant, right? But we go through our lives kind of assuming that things are stable and permanent. So do you think that this modality with psilocybin and MDMA, do you think that helps people get to some of these deeper underlying assumptions, or can it help? I mean,
well, I call it subconscious belief, or delving into the subconscious.
Yeah.
And so again, personal example, I was raised by an alcoholic father, and I was raised by a mother who had a lot of her own trauma. And I had taken on a whole load of subconscious beliefs as a result. And to me, that's one of the ironies of life. It's that we're programmed by subconscious beliefs. So how the hell do you fix the subconscious if you don't even know it's there, right? And so, yes, that's where these experiences allow you to, and that's part of the modality I encourage. Like, well, what's your intention? Okay, let's see what comes up. Let's not distract ourselves. Let's go into our feelings. Let's see what comes up. And in that process, you can kind of delve into some of these subconscious programs. And that's the nice thing too about like that combination of what I call Western world modality. Like we're taking a chemical to alter brain chemistry, but we're also taking a plant medicine, which does have its own intelligence. And so to speak to that for a bit, that intelligence seems to guide people intuitively into where they need to go and allow them to become aware of things if they're willing. And so that there is an element of plant medicine in the combination that has a lot of intuitive wisdom, and in the right set and setting, it seems to offer people this insight they need if they're ready for it.
What I found interesting about this whole experience personally is that having done MDMA by itself and having done psilocybin by itself, the two combined was like neither. Which I don't know if that's a normal thing that you've heard other people who've had this experience.
Absolutely. That's my experience, and that is the experience. That's the uniqueness of the combination. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I was expecting, again, 1 + 1, I was expecting 2, right? I was expecting the effects of both, but it was like the effects of neither, really. It was a very different experience than anything I've ever had. And so for anybody out there who maybe is thinking like, oh, MDMA and psilocybin, like that sounds crazy. It's like, it's the opposite. It's like the opposite of being high and out of control. It's like
Yeah.
being super clear and hyper lucid and feeling like everything's good. Like you can look at things that are more challenging or maybe that are more traumatic that you wouldn't want to look at normally. You can look at
Hmm.
them and be totally at peace with them at the same time,
Hmm.
which is like remarkable.
It is remarkable, isn't it? And that's why it is to me such an effective combination, because what you spoke to, that sense of being able to look at hard stuff from a place of peace, that is the chemical aspect of MDMA. Like your serotonin's up, you are all loving, all forgiving, and then you have that intuitive psilocybin kind of brain neuroplasticity, kind of spirit guided plant medicine guidedness, and it's a very unique, beautiful combination. The evidence speaks for itself. There's a lot of studies being done around it. um, it has a lot to offer, and we need it. Mhm.
So here's my question to you. Do you think we're going to get it as far as the, the legal structures in place and all that kind
Mm.
of stuff? Do you think that it's a realistic to hope that we can have access to this in a, safe, controlled environment in the near future? Or do you think that the government is still resisting really hard on stuff like this? Okay.
I have access to the medical community, and there is a lot of work being done around creating access to it. And the snowball is rolling. And I'm speaking to Canada right now, not the US. The snowball in Canadian medical culture is rolling. These are human beings. Like, it's not us against the medical community. The medical community is us.
Yeah.
They are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are our spouses. They want what's best for us. They take a Hippocratic oath, they serve us as well as they can. So all of this conspiracy crap, especially that's coming up right now, that somehow the medical community is not there trying to serve our best
Mm,
interests, is garbage, absolute, utter rhetorical garbage.
yeah.
They know that the current systems are not working, that they are failing. They see the evidence that these other modalities are way more effective. You have people in that community who are resistant to change. You have people in that community who are advocating change. The tipping point is here. It's happening as we speak. And having said all that, who cares? Let's do it anyway.
I
Right?
like it.
Let's just make it a new norm. And as usual, the system will follow what people are doing anyway. And the system is following us. We are demanding. We are doing this regardless. We are seeing the need, we are seeking. We also have the onus of responsibility to do it in as an ethical a way as possible. And the systems are following. You can actually get legal MDMA treatment in Canada right now.
Wow.
Yeah, you can actually apply. I have met one man who actually did it fully legally. They were also, I like being factual in this age for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
So I can't speak to the specifics of it, but I have a nurse friend, and she is certified to offer psilocybin in near-death experience. She's also a death doula. So as we know, we can now choose assistance in allowing ourselves to pass from this world. She's actually seeking certification that is available to allow psilocybin as part of that sort of experience of reducing the anxiety and stress around facing our own mortality. So these things are happening.
Yeah.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I sent you a link to that one podcast, Thomas Hurdle, a Canadian guy who's got a terminal form of cancer, and he was the first Canadian to be approved for psilocybin. He grew his own mushrooms,
Yeah.
took them with a psychiatrist in a therapeutic setting, and so yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the conversation is shifting, and I saw a good article about the U.S. election the other day. It was like U.S. election biggest winner, drugs, because they
That's
decriminalized
true. Yeah.
drugs in certain states. They they did
Mhm.
all these things, and mushrooms, psilocybin was one of the big ones too. I mean, they decriminalized it in I think Oakland and a bunch of places, right? So yeah, it's nice to see that it's moving in the right direction. We're coming up to an hour there, my friend. I wanted to ask you one last question from my list here. I really want to make a point of asking this question of all my guests. I don't always get a chance to, but here it is. What useful lessons or wisdom would you like to pass on to others?
Well, I'm not going to pretend I have any.
Oh, I'm sure you have something to
No,
offer.
on a serious note, yeah, there's no shortcut to becoming comfortable in your own skin. Just take the time to become comfortable in your own skin. Take 5 minutes a day just to, like, how am I actually feeling right now? how am I feeling? How am I feeling? There's so many of us are just avoiding our feelings, and it's not helpful to anybody, including ourselves. Just take some time with yourself to feel your feelings and just allow yourself to be who you are and accept yourself as you are. No judgment. Just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's time. It's time for us to stop distracting ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean,
Mhm.
as someone who gets distracted easily, I agree as much as I can agree anyways.
Yeah, but at the same time, like if you recognize that your nature is to be active in the world, that's great.
Yeah,
Just take 5 minutes to just be yourself.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
There's no right or wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, great advice, Kai. Well, thanks a lot for making some time for me on this Sunday morning. And yeah, really appreciate it. Hopefully, we can do this again and talk some more about, go into deeper details about some of these topics, because I'm sure there's lots more we could talk about.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invite, Oliver, and it was a pleasure. Thanks.
Hey, my pleasure.
Mhm.